All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our second WildCare happy hour for the Center for Conservation in Madagascar. My name's Emily, and I'm actually going to be behind the scenes for the rest of the time you're with us tonight. But I wanted to come on and just let you know that we use the chat and the Q&A functions both for this particular webinar. So if you just want to say how much you love lemurs and how amazing Dr. Fidy's photos are, we're going to use the chat section. I will be here to check out and make sure everything's going okay. And if you have any questions about the tech portion, you can put it in the chat as well. If you have questions for any of our panelists about what we're talking about tonight, you put it in the Q&A. That's where we're going to check for things. So just make sure you know which one you're looking at when you're typing in, and I hope you have your drink ready to go and you're going to be ready for a great time. Thanks.
Thanks, Emily. So hi, everybody. My name is Mike Poletti. I'm going to be the moderator this evening. I want to wish you all a welcome to our event this evening. I hope you all are enjoying a fresh beverage. Hopefully you're maybe trying out our specialty drink of the evening, the Jungle Bird, which is in association with the topic and the chickens within the jungle of Madagascar. Or perhaps you're even trying out one of the new St. Louis Zoo Kolsch beers that we have on tap that you can buy at your local grocery store. Tonight I'm going to be introducing our two panelists. So first I'm going to be introducing is Lisa Kelley. Lisa Kelley is the Executive Director of the WildCare Institute at the St. Louis Zoo, as well as Dr. Fidy Raz, who is an affiliated scientist with the St. Louis Zoo. And tonight they're going to be talking about the Center for Conservation in Madagascar and the efforts that the St. Louis Zoo is currently doing there to help out within conservation efforts. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to our panelists, Lisa and Dr. Fidy. Lisa, I think you're on mute.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you for that too. So it's my pleasure tonight to get to introduce tonight's speaker, Dr. Fidy Rasambainarivo, and to talk about his project within the larger context of the zoo's history and fieldwork in Madagascar. So the Center for Conservation in Madagascar is one of the founding members of the WildCare Institute, which was established in 2004. However, in reality, the St. Louis Zoo has been involved in conservation work in Madagascar since the late 1980s. They were one of the founding members of a consortium of zoos and aquaria and universities called the Madagascar Fauna and Flora Group. Here on out, we'll call it the MFG. The MFG has two main sites where they've done their work, and they continue, by the way, to be our primary partner, really our major partner today in Madagascar. But their two primary sites are Betampona Natural Reserve, and that will be the setting for Fidy's talk today. And then the second major site is Ivaluine Zoological Park, which is only one of two zoological institutions in Madagascar. Forward the slide, please. So if you were to do a Google search of MFG, you would see that they are very much involved in all kinds of flora and fauna, including whether it be invasive species or rare amphibians. But their longest history has been with the lemurs. And in fact, if you were to do a Google search on primate reintroductions, the MFG's work on what was then called a restocking program of black and white rough lemurs would most certainly come up. Primates are one of the most difficult species for reintroductions, and they really did a fantastic job. So the consortium, by the way, consisting of the St. Louis Zoo, Duke University, and many other players. And so the central slide there, that's of a lemur named Sarf, I believe. And if you were to go to Betampona, which you would need a special permit, you would probably see some of his offspring still there today. Now, I will point out that I was not a part of this restocking program. I was a keeper then at the primate house in the St. Louis Zoo. Very much interested in lemurs. That's really where I fell in love with the species. And in fact, that picture of me as a baby was the last day at work there, because I then left to do a master's program in primate conservation in England. And the reason why I did that is I thought, if these animals could be so remarkable in zoo care, what can they possibly be like in the wild? And in fact, that did give me the opportunity. I spent 5 months studying something called the silky sifok in the far north of Madagascar. And after I graduated with my MSc, I did a short stint as a sanctuary manager in the far south of Madagascar. And then if you could advance slide, please. And then I went into a PhD program, which brought me back to St. Louis, which I very much missed, at Washington University, which was also where I did my undergraduate work, working for the late and great Dr. Bob Sussman. And what you'll see, these slides here was my dissertation site, very unlike the slides that Fidy will be showing you of Betampona. This is in Cap Sainte Marie, which is in the very far south of Madagascar. If you were to drop a pin, you couldn't go any further. It's semi-desert environment, very scrubby. So this was in the anthropology department. So the question really being a species which is considered, as lemurs, all lemurs are very much in trouble. Ringtails, at least ecologically, they're a little more flexible than some of the other species. So the question being, how does this species that's relatively adaptable behave in the worst, scrubbiest environment they could possibly live in? In fact, most of their environment, there was a lot of invasive species. Their sleeping sites were the hedges around cropland. It was not ideal condition. So one of the things that was required is that, of course, I would need to know their nutrition as well as their ranging behavior, and their individual identifications and their health assessments. So I received a field research for conservation grant from the St. Louis Zoo. And not only that, but I got to get the assistance of, which was then one of the head veterinarians, Dr. Randy Youngie, who's now at Columbus Zoo, to help collar these individuals and do the health assessments. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay. And so when Randy came, he said, well, you know, I have this remarkable person who's a wildlife veterinarian at the University of Antananarivo. He's going to come with and assist. And that was no other than Fidy, who you see pictured here. And as you will be able to tell from his presentation, not only is he an incredible scientist with great research questions and very data-driven, but he is also, what maybe comes across in these slides, incredibly kind. I mean, when we are doing this, health assessments typically aren't my favorite thing because it involves some anesthetizing the animals and darting, but it went so smoothly, and it was just because it was such a competent and laid back group, and it went really well. And I feel like these pictures really show just how well-rounded Fidy is. So that's where I first met Fidy. Since that time, he has gone on and gotten a couple more degrees. Most recently, he got a PhD at the Whitney R. Harris World Ecology Center under Patty Parker, and this is at UMSL, and she is also the zoo senior scientist. And after he graduated, he has stayed on helping with the zoo, assisting with the zoo in the center as an affiliate scientist. And part of his what he does through this job is overseeing some central projects of the Madagascar Fauna and Flora group, the MFG, through assistance with the zoo. And if you could show the next slide, please. So this will, so one of the major projects he's doing is a Newcastle disease study on chickens. And he will probably bring up some of his other studies and what else he's doing as well, but this is really the basis of today's talk, this project. And so with that, I will leave it to Fidy.
Hello. Hi. Thank you very much for having me, and welcome to everybody to this great evening. I hope you're enjoying your drink, whatever you're having this evening. And so I'm really pleased to be here and talking to you about this research project that is called this research conservation project that we call How Can Chickens Help Save the Lemurs? And first of all, I would like to acknowledge my collaborators, Ingrid Borden, Karen Freeman, and Christian Rambelson, who are driving this project both from the US, the UK, or from Madagascar. And so this project is a collaboration between the Madagascar Fauna and Flora group with a grant from the IUCN-SOS, Save Our Species project. So as Lisa mentioned earlier, the St. Louis Zoo has been involved with conservation in Madagascar through the Madagascar Fauna and Flora group for a really long time, since the 1990s, mainly at Ivoluina, the zoological park in Tamatave, one of the largest cities of Madagascar, but also, and most importantly, probably around the Betampona Natural Reserve on the east coast of Madagascar, that you can see on the black dot right here on the map. And Betampona Natural Reserve is, I would say, a gem in terms of biodiversity. It's one of the last remnant of lowland protected rainforest in Madagascar. It is 22 square kilometers in size, but it is one of the richest in terms of biodiversity, especially when it comes to amphibians, and as well as other mammal species. And here you can see a photo of the ringtail Lemur, which is a small carnivore, and that was one of the study species for my PhD. And when you think about Betampona, you also think about the lemurs of Betampona, all of which are threatened in one way or another, ranging with the status ranging from vulnerable to critically endangered. And of the critically endangered species, you have three that exist in Betampona: the black and white ruffed lemur that Lisa mentioned earlier, and that from which the MFG did a reintroduction project with lemurs born in the United States that were reintroduced in Betampona. There's also the largest extent of lemurs that is there, the Indri, the middle photo right there, as well as my very favorite species lemurs, the Diadem shifak. And the Diadem shifak is a critically endangered lemur species. And actually, as we speak, we were supposed to do a translocation project with the support from the St. Louis Zoo and the Madagascar Fauna and Flora group. But due to the COVID pandemic, that project has been put on hold and hopefully will occur next year. But this project was supposed to bring some new individuals of Prothegus diadema into Betampona from another site on the east coast of Madagascar. But Betampona is not just the forest, and it's not just the wild animals that are living in the forest. And if you zoom out a little bit from the forest, you can see the wider landscape, and which is dominated by human habitation and human habitat with agricultural land. And the border from the forest to the human-dominated landscape is, as you can see on this photo, quasi non-existent. People are living very close to each other, to the forest, and are sometimes using are mostly using resources from the natural habitats as well for their own livelihood. In fact, you can see in this satellite photo the bordering of you can see the villages that are represented here in white dots on the map, and they are very close to the protected area that is bordered with a red line on the east. And unfortunately, sometimes people are also going into the protected area and using and hunting or poaching for wild animals, as well as collecting wood sometimes as well. That we can see on the photo on the right, which is taken from a camera trap photo inside of the Betampona Natural Reserve, where you can see an individual that has captured, unfortunately captured, one of the vulnerable lemur, white-fronted brown lemur. There are many drivers of many reasons why people are poaching inside the or hunting for wild animals. And one of the main reasons that we think of is people are hunting wild animals because they are food insecure. They need proteins. And a research by Ferris and al. Showed that in Betampona, like 90% or 80% of the households only eat meat less than twice a month, which is not very much. Madagascar is also one of the countries with the highest prevalence of stunting, partially because of this lack of protein in the diet. Another reason you can think of for poaching is that there's cultural preference. Maybe some people, a little bit like here, where some people may prefer the taste of wild deer over your common hamburger. Some people may prefer the taste of wild animals as well. And so those are the things that we need to address and to examine when we try to address this this issue of poaching and try to reduce the consumption of bushmeat, which is the wild animals. And this is exactly what Dr. Chris Golden from Harvard did at two different sites in Madagascar, the Makira National Park in the northeast of Madagascar, as well as around Betampona. He was surveying people in these villages and trying to see and understand what are the main reasons for poaching and for consuming bushmeat. What he first found is that near Betampona, 50% of the households have consumed bushmeat, wild animals, mainly tenrecs, which are insectivore species. I would say they look a little bit like hedgehogs, though sometimes bigger, and but also, unfortunately, sometimes lemurs as well. And what he has also found is that people do not prefer the taste of bushmeat compared to chickens or other livestock. And in fact, chickens were the most preferred meat taste in those villages, in those communities. But the problem was that the villagers were losing a lot of their chickens, mainly through predation from wild animals, as well as from diseases. And the main disease that is occurring in chickens in these in these villages is called the Newcastle disease. And Newcastle is a disease that is caused by a virus of the same name, and it affects mainly poultry, so domestic chickens, turkeys as well. It can affect wild birds, but usually it is not very lethal. But when it comes to chickens, usually like 40 to 100% of the flock is lost. It dies within like a few days or a week. And so that is a very devastating loss for those households that are relying so much on chickens for their food sources. Here in the United States, Newcastle disease is actually just got eradicated as of June of 2020. There are a few outbreaks once in a while, but it is mainly the United States was declared free of Newcastle disease virus, and that is thanks to a vaccine that is very effective. But the problem is that this vaccine is administered mainly through injection, and it also requires a cold chain. So it requires that it is kept in the refrigerator if it is not being used. And as you can imagine, in rural parts of Madagascar, where there's no running water, there's no electricity, having a fridge is not very common. So that has impeded the adoption of vaccination for chickens and their protection against Newcastle disease. Luckily, as of 3 years ago, the Institut Malgache des Vaccins Vétérinaires, which is the veterinary production factory in vaccine product factory in Madagascar, has developed a thermo-resistant vaccine that they call I2. And the advantage of this vaccine are twofold. One, it is, as you can see on the photo, it is administered by eye drop, so very easy. It doesn't require any needles or syringes. And also it is thermal resistant, so it can be kept at room temperature for a much longer period of time, and so it can be used and deployed in those communities that are remote. And so the Madagascar Fauna and Flora group applied for a grant through the IUCN Institute for Conservation of Nature, and received the grant to hold vaccination campaigns in those communities near Betampona. And so now every 4 months, there's 12 vaccinators in the 12 villages that are surrounding the Betampona Natural Reserve, where people can that are going and visiting each household and ask them if they want their chickens vaccinated for free. This project is large, as it affects, as I was saying, 12 villages. That is about 680 households. This number of households fluctuates from campaign to campaign, but about 600 households are participating regularly, consistently to this vaccination campaign. And that is directly benefiting about 2,000 people. In addition to the vaccination, with the same villagers, the same vaccinators are going into the villages as a follow-up or prior to the next vaccination, and they ask or they count the number of chickens that that each household owned, and as well as the number of chickens that they have eaten, sold, lost, or as well as the eggs that they have consumed over the past 4 months. And this allows us to evaluate the project and to see whether the households are eating, consuming, or losing less chickens. And what we've seen at the very beginning of the project in May 2018 is that each household had on average about 23 chickens. When we go there, when the villagers asked at the time, they had about 9 chickens that they currently owned, but over the previous 4 months they had about 23 chickens. And what is most remarkable is that about 40%, they lost about 40% of those chickens, either from predation or from diseases, including Newcastle disease. And they consumed or they received benefits only from a small portion of those chickens, either from selling them or from eating them. And after the first 2 years of this project, so 6 vaccinations, again, the vaccinations are done every 4 months, we see a significant increase in the number of chickens that each household have. It has increased by 23%, the number of chickens that they owned over the previous 4 months. And not only do they have more chickens as when we survey them, but maybe most importantly is that the number of chickens the proportion of chickens that they've lost is greatly reduced, from 40% at the start. Now each household report that they only lost about 10% of their entire flocks at the end of after the vaccination. And these chickens are an important source of revenue as well as food, especially now in the times of coronavirus, where where Madagascar has lost about $500 million worth of tourism revenue because of the border closing. Betampona in itself is not open to tourism, but the communities that are living near the reserve may suffer somewhat from the negative economic impact of the disease, because of the markets and the prices are going up. And so this project may provide them with important revenue, and also this also provides 12 villagers in those communities with temporary employment and revenue. Reliable revenue that they would not get otherwise, and that is important for those people as well. In addition to those direct impact on the communities that are living in Betampona, this project is also a great opportunity for capacity building, for building capacity for conservation. And this is the quote that a famous Senegalese conservationist said, is that in the end, we will only conserve what we love, we will love only what we understand, and we will understand only what we are taught. And this is one of the driving force behind what we're doing as well, is that we're trying to build a task force of young Malagasy conservationists that will understand their own backyard. And with the support of the St. Louis Zoo, we have started a lab in Tana, the capital of Madagascar, called Marlina. And the goal of Marlina is to build this task force and to build the capacity of young Malagasy scientists in techniques, and provide them with guidance and tools that they can use to better understand their environment, and also to conserve it better. So, and finally, this is a part that I did not touch upon through this talk, but in addition to the chicken vaccination, the Madagascar Fauna and Flora Group and IUCN also partnered to provide to run a stove distribution project in those same communities around Betampona. And here the rationale is that people using this fuel economic stove, people will need less wood, and thus will need less to collect less wood and destroy the habitat, maybe at a smaller at a lower pace. And both of these projects are now reaching the end of their funding cycle, and we are going to start the post-program surveys, where we're going to run the same surveys that Dr. Chris Golden used at the beginning of the survey, and for the chicken project, and actually see the impact, and see whether this project has not only increased in the consumption and the flock size of chickens, but also reduced the prevalence of poaching and bushmeat consumption in those villages. So with that, I would like to thank you very much. And if you have any question, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you, Dr. Fidy. That was absolutely fascinating. And it's always interesting to hear the work that is being done throughout the environment, not only with the St. Louis Zoo and the WildCare Institute, but also with the partners that we have across the globe. And we do have a couple of questions this evening. So I'm going to go ahead and get those started in the interest of time. So I'm going to go ahead and start with a question that we had the other day in terms of what is being done in conjunction with the conservation efforts to aid in the reduction of human-wildlife conflicts? Some examples could be as educational programs or better farming practices. What are some of those ideas that we have?
So in terms of reducing the wildlife conflicts at the interface between humans and wildlife in Betampona, one of the main conflict that we have is that the dogs and cats that are living in the villages and that are roaming into the reserve. And so one of the projects that is being done is, well, we're trying to understand to what extent is that a problem, and hopefully in the future trying to reduce that through vaccination or spay and neuter campaigns. So that is one of the conflict that we're trying to address, and also here in terms of for the chickens in particular, as I was mentioning earlier, one of the problems that the people mentioned was that they are losing chickens from predation. They're losing chickens from predation from the Fusa as well as the Vunsira that I've shown earlier, some carnivores. And so in other parts of Madagascar, there is a negative view towards those carnivores. And one of the next step of this project, in addition to the vaccination, is to come back into the drawing board and try to get the feedback from those communities, trying to see what are the main reason for the loss of chickens, and trying to address that. Maybe it will be a change in husbandry practices, but that will come from our discussion with the communities.
It's certainly a personalized approach to it. I mean, especially within the communities that are fully impacted by this. So, oh, great. So in terms of talking about the vaccination, we did have a question that came in. How much does the vaccination cost when it's fully deployed?
So each vaccination is about 200 RER. 200 RER is so small that I cannot, it's hard. I would say like 10 vaccination is 2,000 is about 50 cents. So 10 vaccination is about 50 cents. And now the campaign, as I was saying, is 600 households. That's about 10,000 chickens every time, and so each campaign would be let's make the math, maybe 5,000. I don't know.
Oh, we're talking about a lot of chickens.
Yeah.
Okay. So out of that, in terms of what is some of the, where does the primary funding source from for this type of work? Does it come from nonprofit organizations that generate the revenue, or is it something that is driven from the government, or where is that generated from?
So this project was provided from the Madagascar Fauna and Flora group through a grant from the IUCN-SOS Save Our Species program. And so now it is provided for free. So for the first 2 years, it was provided, the vaccination were provided for free. And the objective was to, at the end of it, people will see the benefit of vaccinating the chickens, and maybe will be able to cover some of the cost of the vaccine in the future as well. We are right at the end of this funding cycle, and we're hoping to continue because we cannot right now conduct this willingness to pay survey. Hoping to continue at least cover one or two vaccinations.
Gotcha. Okay. So another question that came in, and this is actually a really interesting one, and I'm not entirely sure if you covered this or not, but it's definitely an interesting one. In terms of the chickens themselves, do the populations and the communities, do they also eat the eggs that are laid by the chickens, or is it just the meat itself that they are eating?
So each time we go and survey the household, we also ask about the consumption of eggs. But what we've seen in our surveys is that usually people do not really eat eggs. I think that the consumption rate of eggs is less than 1 egg per trimester per household. Usually people keep the eggs and have them hatch and so to have more chickens. So the use of chicken is mainly for the meat itself.
Okay. And another question that we had come in was, can it be difficult working with the local institutions? For example, is it hard to get approvals and to coordinate through either the local government or within the communities themselves, getting a communication with them since they're in such a rural community? What are some of the difficulties that your team sees?
So Newcastle disease is what we call a reportable disease, and it is one of the major effort of the major concern of the government to because of the loss of chickens that we have in Madagascar due to this disease. So usually the government and the local authorities are very aware of this problem and are willing to help as much as they can. So for example, we have developed a collaboration with the Veterinarian Institute in Vavet that I mentioned earlier, as well as the veterinarian that is responsible for this zone, and working very closely with both of these administrative offices. So no, there was no there's no roadblock here in terms of administrative authorization. The difficult part is that the vaccine is produced in Tana, which is the capital of Madagascar, right in the center of the island, and we are working in a remote part on the east coast of Madagascar, and so the vaccine are produced there and need to be transported to these remote areas, and that requires a lot of logistic arrangements. And so that is.
Okay, so speaking along those lines, I have a two-pronged question that I want to ask, and I think this one may be better for Lisa to answer, considering this is more related to the WildCare Institute. So the question is what drove the St. Louis Zoo, specifically the WildCare Institute within the zoo, to participate in the conservation efforts within Madagascar? So that's the first prong of the question. So do you want me to let you answer that one first? Or do you want me to ask the second question as well?
You're welcome to ask that. I can answer the first one.
All right, let's answer the first one first.
Full disclosure, it was before my time, so I'm gonna just speculate. Although I think I have a pretty good idea. The curators in general at the St. Louis Zoo have been for a very long time, way before the WildCare Institute, very interested in wildlife conservation, and it really stemmed from early work of the curators who and in this case it was Ingrid, and then before that it was someone even before that, I believe in the 1980s with black lemurs in northwest Madagascar, interested in their conservation efforts. I mean, and back then, which just seems strange, but in the 1980s, 1990s, that was very progressive thinking, yes, species survival programs are very important, but really what are zoos' impact in the wild? So really the zoo's conservation efforts, and in this case in particular with Madagascar, really predate by decades the WildCare Institute. So it was really just an appreciation for knowing that's why zoos are here. They're here for conservation, and to do it effectively, you really have to have. Saying the fence to field approach seems a little jargony, but it really is that, what we do in zoo care, it really ultimately has to have impact for animals in the wild. So I was a keeper then, and I know that love and that passion. I remember seeing so many graduate students coming up back then. The curators had their offices in the departments, and the grad students going up and down this narrow staircase and consulting about what efforts would be most have the most impact on animals in the wild, and then kind of streaming out and writing up their dissertations. So it really just it's deep seated in the St. Louis Zoo. It really does go back many decades. So that's my speculation, although I have to admit I wasn't a part of that. So
well, I think that was a pretty good answer, so I'm going to give you a pass on that one. If it wasn't 100% accurate, I think that's okay.
Okay.
So in regards to that, this kind of also tailors to the question Dr. Fidy just answered in terms of the difficulties that his work has been facing within the region. The same question applies to the lemur population. So specifically to the conservation work surrounding lemurs, what are some of the difficulties that the WildCare Institute, the conservation center there within Madagascar, has been facing?
Well, most recently, obviously, with COVID, it's just been very reliant. But luckily, there's been so many decades of capacity building, of which Fidy's been talking about as well, that he feels very passionately about. So there is a team that's there so when Fidy showed that poached lemur, for example, there's someone named John Newell who actually won one of the Marlon Perkins Award with Karen Freeman, who also is a consultant through the zoo. And he made sure, pandemic or no pandemic, he was in Madagascar, that he was going to be there to protect the forest. But really just the fact that the travel restrictions are banned, it's such a poor country. Even before COVID-19, it was, one of the most poor non-warring countries in the world. It's suffered from that for a while. So just getting resources there and being able to get the conservation work done. This is the hardest thing about, in my mind, and Fidy will also be able to answer this better than I am, but it's difficult when the forests are destroyed, not out of greed, but because it's for daily living. They want to be warm, they want to be able to cook, they want to eat, they want protein. And so when they go through the forest and they poach lemurs and they cut down wood, it's not so simple, because it's not as if you can say, oh, those are bad guys. They're just people trying to live. And really, there's so much, when I was there, there's so much more resourceful. What they can live on and be happy with in terms of resources is so much less than us. I mean, I couldn't imagine being in the same situation. So it's really difficult, because it isn't a black and white solution. It's really, it's very nuanced. And I don't know, Fidy, if you want to build on that answer.
Yeah, I think you explained it beautifully, and that's exactly it. That the complex part of conservation in Madagascar, as well as any other lower middle income countries, is just this complexities of you have conservation in one side that is conflicting with livelihood of people that are living in the same habitat. And that's why this project here, where we're trying to build upon the livelihood of people, so that they will maybe use less resources or need less resources from the forest, are so important. And as Lisa mentioned earlier, right now one of the main challenges COVID-19 is where we do not have revenues from tourism, or for this in many protected areas. There's an increasing pressure. We also have the absence of research that is being done. A lot of the time that the research are from scholars in Western universities, as well as from Madagascar, but we also there's travel bans between regions, and so you cannot get into those protected areas, and so we do not know for sure what is happening and how is this this is impacting the wild animals.
Fascinating. So so we have a couple more questions, and we only have about 11 minutes left in terms of our presentation. So I'm going to try and get through them relatively quickly. So the next question I have, we had another one come in from a guest in terms of the vaccination. So can you reiterate the amount of vaccinations that are given? Is it done on an annual basis, or is it done on a monthly basis? How often is that done?
So this particular vaccine is done every 4 months. The injection that I mentioned earlier, and that requires a cold chain, that one can be done every year, but this one is done every 4 months, so 3 times a year.
Okay, great. So switching it up a little bit. So outside of the specific work that you all do, you all, both of you yourselves, have spent a lot of time within this region and have done a lot of work there. On a personal level, can you explain to us what it is in terms of either a moment or an experience that either one of you would like to share in terms of something that you thought was absolutely remarkable, was a life-changing moment, or something that you really vividly remember in terms of all the work that you've done there over the years? How about Lisa? How about we start with you? I'm going to put you on the spot.
Sure, I have two. I could either go the animal route or the human route. The human route that I shared yesterday, or I can give a new one about an incredible animal experience I saw that, to me, really says a lot about, you know, primates, us being a primate, really about our origins, I guess. I'm going to do that one today, I think.
Okay, great.
All right, so you may not have noticed, but in my introduction slides, when I was showing the field side, I had a young ringtail lemur prominently displayed on a cactus, you know, kind of posing like this, and it was like a central slide. Her name was Oops. There was a very good reason for that, and I don't know if you noticed, but she had a little bit of a pot belly, and she looked very healthy. So when my study, like I said, was one of the hardest habitats for ring-tailed lemurs. And one troop in particular was really bad off. I mean, it's not a fun story. I dreaded the days we had to go to that troop because there were so many die-offs. It didn't fare well. I wouldn't be surprised if the whole group was extirpated. And it was incredibly hot because the habitat was even more degraded than what we called the healthier troop. And one day we get there and we hear this mew sound, because ring-tailed lemurs, when they're calling out and kind of crying, they do this sort of cat sound, like mew, mew. And we see, and it was a small troop by then, it's about 8 individuals sitting there. And it's a tiny little shady spot, because you can imagine like weather like now, right? You know, really hot and very little shade, you're seeking any out. And there's that little infant lemur dragging by its front, by its, you know, front legs and front arms, and the mother kind of grabbing it and pulling it by the tail and pulling her out in the shade, pulling her shade. And it was very clear something had happened. The infant had fallen, and we thought for sure, there's so many deaths, this infant's a goner, it's dead. I even contemplated, is it better to put it out of its misery? Should we, you know, it was horrible. We didn't want to leave, thought we should leave. I mean, maybe it was cowardly because I didn't put her out of her misery, thinking, you know, then she's going to have a long, slow death. Then we came back the next day and we couldn't find him. We thought, well, she probably, you know, had fallen in the cactus and had died. And then we see these drag marks, because they're 2 home sites. They were, I mean, hours away. And you see these drag marks on the side of the sand because it's a very dry environment. I'm really thinking, what is going on there? We now think that she had the mother, who I should send as dominant. So oftentimes the dominant female in ring-tailed lemurs, they kind of have the say, which maybe helped. It was her infant and it was a large enough infant, it kind of like shaped itself on the top of the mom's back, is what we were assuming, and its legs dragged because she was so big. And they went all the way to their other home range area. And we see her, she had been plopped in a tree like this. She still didn't have use of her legs. And everyone's eating and everything. Like, wow, I can't believe she didn't die, but she's surely going to die. You know, this is not good. She has no use for her legs. And long story short, she made a full recovery of all the deaths that happened and everything. Full recovery, pot-bellied, you know, acting a little sprightly thing. And so we called her, then we felt safe to call her Oops. And, you know, as far as we know, she was thriving, surviving. And what was so remarkable to me is just, I still think of that day when the whole troop is just sitting there, just in a line, instead of, I mean, I know she was the dominant female, but they just sat there sort of waiting to figure out the situation, and they didn't refuse to leave her behind. And she survived as a result. And talking to Randy, who I had introduced in the slides, he said it's common when they're that young, if they break their back, they can actually survive, although albeit probably in better circumstances than that. So that's my animal story. I dedicated my dissertation to her and everything that I had to share.
Wow, that's absolutely remarkable. Why didn't you share that one yesterday when we were talking?
I
Great.
have so many, I wasn't sure which way to go.
How about you, Dr. Fidy?
Actually, it's hard to equal that, but I'm trying to think of any good story that I would have. But like one story that I remember, and I think that's the one that made me really like carnivores, including the Fusa. It was that I was working in Madagascar, in the south west part of Madagascar, with Dr. Lewis, and we were capturing lemurs to do a biomedical health evaluation and put collars on them. But one at night, usually you have Fusa, or you had this one particular Fusa that was coming into the reserve, into the camp, and trying to see if there was any food. There was never any, but trying to see if he could hunt anything. And one night I happened to be up late, but for some reason he just walked past right next to me and actually stepped on my foot as he was going elsewhere, just minding his own business. I was standing very still. That's the closest I've been to a Fusa that was fully awake, but I still don't understand why he did that, but that was just like, yeah, cool. And so that's the one story that that stays with me in terms of Fusa and other wild animals.
Wow, definitely an eye-opening event, I would imagine.
Yes.
So we have about 3 minutes left. And we have one more question that we want to get in. And this one's actually a very important question, and I'm really glad it's going to be asked. So all the important work that we're doing over there in terms of helping the environment out, what is it that this audience can do, or even the population in general? What is it that they can do to help out in terms of Dr. Fidy and the work that you're doing, as well as the work that the WildCare Institute is doing?
Do you want to start this? Well, what this audience can do, there's a lot that we can do. Like everything is connected, right? Like what we do here impacts what is there, and what we can do here is, well, first of all, supporting the zoo. I would say, and this is not just maybe in a zoo affiliate scientists, but I think the zoo is working very closely with Madagascar, or any conservation institute, and that really helps research through conservation through projects like the one that I was mentioning. And so coming supporting the zoo in one way or the other. And that really helps educating yourself into the problems that occur, and why what happens, why that happens, and not necessarily just as Lisa mentioned, blaming local for the loss of wildlife. And that's another thing that would really help. Yeah. And if you are interested in doing research, doing conservation work, all that will really help as well. The more people that are aware and doing this work, the better we'll be. That's my answer.
Okay. How about you, Lisa?
Fidy answered that so well. But it's something that the zoo we often think about when there's important wildlife conservations someplace, at a place that's difficult for many of us to access. It's far away and expensive. What can we do locally to help globally? And the recognition, probably now more than ever, the recognition that everything is interconnected. And when you protect wildlife, Fidy also is a big part of the One Health concept, which means everything's interconnected. Human health with wildlife and the environment. Also things such as So one of the things that is a little bit more of a dark side that happens in Madagascar is unsustainable wood. There was my first field site in Marjesi, there's precious hardwoods that are, so there is a really big business in that, which is yet another problem that Madagascar has had to deal with. So just even being cognizant about, you know, making sure you have sustainable, when you buy wood products, making sure it's not something that was covered from, you know, of one of the rare forests in Madagascar. But really, Fidy said it so well. I mean, just to build on that, just continue supporting conservation efforts, whether it be at the zoo, whether it be directly for WildCare or the zoo generally, or any wildlife conservation effort locally. Just knowing we're all in it together. The St. Louis area has an incredible partnership of conservation efforts. I mean, we have great partnerships with UMSL and Washington University, St. Louis, and the Botanical Gardens, Endangered Wolf Center. Even, you know, we all are all interconnected. So just being aware, we're in a very lucky place in St. Louis that there's so many prominent conservation organizations. So just being a part of that community and learning more and being there for support and providing insight. There's some so many people have come in with great ideas and great insight that we hadn't seen. So even just continue showing your ideas and your enthusiasm. It's all good stuff.
Awesome. Well, thank you both, Dr. Fidy and Lisa, for your presentation this evening. It was very informative, and as I said earlier, it's absolutely amazing to hear the work that we're doing specifically in Madagascar. And thank you for everybody that attended this evening's event. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as we did, and then you were able to enjoy a nice frosty beverage at the same time. We do have another event that's going to be coming up here on August 6th. It's going to be focusing on the American burying beetle. So if you would like to register for that, you can visit the St. Louis Zoo's website at stlzoo.org/happy-hour. If you're interested in more information surrounding our work within Madagascar through the WildCare Institute, you can also visit the St. Louis Zoo's website at stlzoo.org. So thank you all very much for attending, and we hope to see you very soon. Have a good night.
Thank you very much.